recently talked to Randy Couture, one of the great UFC fighters at heavyweight division ever, one of the few guys that have won titles in two different divisions, and asked him about this Miocic and Jon Jones fight, and the idea of it's a GOAT versus the heavyweight GOAT and the relevancy historically. But he had an interesting point on the fact that he doesn't feel Jon Jones is the GOAT because what he's done away from the cage and all the rumors and the positive drug tests and the arrests and all those kinds of things, even going back to his days in college, he brought up the fact why wasn't a guy like as talented as him in a Division One school, and when he supposedly got in invites and he had met with some schools, like what's been his life, how his life outside the cage has been one of the narratives to his career, and should that negate him from being in the GOAT conversation? What are your thoughts on it? It's an interesting case. It's coming from as reputable a source as there is, a guy who's been a champion, a two-division champion, a legend. Does that take Jon Jones out of the GOAT debate? Or as one person on Facebook responded to this story, in that you got to separate the artist from the art. And his art was in the ring, and he puts in an octagon. He put on some amazing pieces of artwork, and that separates him from the person outside.
Once again, I do find the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but I'm leaning more towards the anonymous Facebook commenter here, because you can't just ignore what he did in the cage. He absolutely wiped the floor with just about everybody he fought. And we're talking about legends. We're talking about this who's who of champions in what used to be the UFC's glamour division. So it's impossible to just dismiss that because he does stupid things outside the cage. Now, I think if you're trying to elevate him to like a Muhammad Ali status, you're trying to elevate him to I would say even LeBron James is on, it should be mentioned in some of these conversations where you're talking about athletes that transcend their sport for sort of the positive effect they have on the world around them, or at least the attempt to have a positive effect, or have some sort of that becomes some sort of authority in social or political matters or whatnot. Yes, Jon Jones is not the guy to turn to for any sort of nuanced advice about, social matters or anything like that. He's definitely not the guy that I want running for mayor, but he doesn't deserve to have his legacy as a fighter trashed because of that, because he still went in that cage and performed. And honestly, I find it interesting that Randy Couture even is calling out someone based on some of their personal decisions. I mean, this is a guy who's had a lot of controversies with women as far as like adultery and all sorts of things, all sorts of moral check marks that you can look at with him and say, that's probably not the best thing for a good guy to do. So you're in a glass house, don't throw stones. And we're also talking about Randy Couture never competing in an era where drug testing was a real serious thing. So we don't know what he was doing. We don't know what his competitors were doing. We don't know what his teammates were doing. So when you start introducing the PEDs into it, that's when things get really crazy, because then it's like, all right, well, is Fedor not the GOAT because Pride let people do steroids? Like, he still decimated everybody that was in front of him in his heyday. You can't, it becomes too muddled of an argument. And it introduces things that just complicate whether or not someone was good or not in the cage. And yeah, so I think Jon Jones's GOAT case still is very, very easy to make.